The architects of the American Health Care Act, the GOP's plan to replace Obamacare, introduced a legislation on Capitol Hill just moments ago. Speaker Paul Ryan, along with Energy and Commerce Committee Chairman Greg Walden and Republican leadership, while they address reporters, and here are just some of the highlights.
I'm prepared to lead our conference to doing what we said we would do in the election. We actually ran on a repeal and replace plan. The nightmare of Obamacare is about to end. I've been doing conservative health care reform for 20 years. The most important thing that this thing does is it takes power out of Washington. This is the beginning of the legislative process. We've got a few weeks. We'll have 218 when this thing comes to the floor. I can guarantee you that.
Joining me now, Congressman Tom McClintock and Congressman Andy Harris. Congressman McClintock, let me start with you. A lot of pushback on this from members of the Republican Party, and there are several questions that the American public wants to understand. First and foremost, is this real repeal and replace?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question. I have to be convinced that they can do all of this through the reconciliation vehicle itself. I think the plan is very sound. The plan is what we've been talking about for years. Restore choice to the marketplace, restore the freedom for people to select from a wide range of plans, and then assure that at least the basic plans within their financial reach through the expansion of health savings accounts and a refundable tax credit. That plan is sound. My concern is whether they can accomplish all that through reconciliation alone, and I have yet to be convinced of that.
Same question to you, sir, Representative Harris.
Look, I think that this is a great start. This is, again, it is something we've talked about for years. The most important thing for every American to know is that if you have a pre-existing condition, you're not going to lose your coverage. This is a very important feature of this plan. The other thing it does, as Speaker Ryan said in your clip, this will devolve control to the states, and that's really what we ought to do. Washington ought to get out of its health care involvement with Obamacare. This does a lot to do that.
Yeah, and I heard when Paul Ryan talked about that, but he seemed a little bit defensive, and this is the rub. Will this plan, when it's ultimately completed and everyone gets their, whatever they need to have to come to the table and say yes, will there be more people covered or less people covered? Because right now, the mainstream media is saying that ultimately there will be fewer people covered, and if so, would that be a political mistake?
Well, look, I think it repeals the individual mandate, so obviously people are not going to be required by the federal government to have coverage, but I think what it does is it brings down the cost of health care coverage. When you bring down the cost of any good that a consumer goes to buy, more people buy it. So I think it makes health plans and health coverage much more available to the average person.
Well, and not only that, but you're going to have a much wider range of choices. You can purchase the plan that best meets your own needs without being forced to buy a lot of bells and whistles that you don't need and don't want and can't afford. That kind of a competitive market is dynamic, and I agree with Andy. I think you'll see a lot more people availing themselves of that market. Right now, more people are opting to pay the tax penalty than to buy plans in the Obamacare exchanges. That tells you a lot right there. And
the main reason is because there's nothing cheap, right? So there will be a bare bones plan here, and that might draw in some of the younger folks who have opted out of this. Finally, the big rub within the Republican Party, subsidies. In this particular case, tax credits. Are these subsidies, is the government taking on a role that it should not take? This has a lot of folks, whether it's Rand Paul or some of the Heritage, Club for Growth, many of these real well-known conservative entities and some senators, in fact, are saying that these tax credits may have to go.
But Charles, we give enormous tax advantages to companies so that they will choose a plan, impose that on their employees, and that their employees are stuck with, and if they lose their jobs, they lose their health plan. All we're saying is, why don't we provide those same kind of tax advantages to the individual employees themselves so they can afford to purchase a plan that best meets their needs, that they can own, that they can take from job to job, and that they can fire and replace if they no longer serve their needs. That doesn't sound like an entitlement to me.
Nope.
Quite the contrary.
Absolutely. A lot of conservative groups for years have called for leveling the playing field for the deductibility of health care insurance. That's really what this plan does.
Curbing the cost. Listen, let's face it, the baby boomers are just now aging. We're living longer. We're more ambitious. 70 years old, we go bike riding and skiing. So curbing the cost is a tough one, particularly when you start saying government, will they even meddle with respect to how drug pricing?
And restoring competition is so critically important. Will and Ariel Durant asked the question, what makes Ford a good car? Chevrolet, competition. That's what this plan does, is to open up a wide range of competitive plans with healthcare companies tripping over one another to try to get your business. That puts you in the driver's seat as, with the power of a consumer, you make those decisions. We assure through the tax system that's within your financial reach. That's the kind of plan that we desperately need today, especially in the Obamacare markets, where in 1/3 of the counties in the country, you don't get a choice anymore. There's only one provider available. That's not
health savings accounts, a prominent feature of this bill. What that does is lead to price transparency. Look, I was a physician. The healthcare marketplace has no price transparency now. You put health savings accounts and expand them, you're going to have price transparency. That always brings the cost of a product down.
Well, gentlemen, I thank you both for coming on tonight. It feels good. It feels like we're on our way. And indeed, this has been a national nightmare for so many people. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
It's a real pleasure, Charles. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Charles.
See you again soon.